It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are in Sacramento, the state's capital. We are joined by Sebastian Ridley-Thomas. He is a member of the California State Assembly. And so I want to speak with you about the fiscal order of this great state, which actually is not in bad shape.
Not in bad shape for the first time in a long time. It's a constant refrain that you will hear from me, because this is a much better time than what we found ourselves previously. The governor recently released the May revision.
Right.
Revenues are above what was projected. Some of our taxes are a little lower in collections, property tax in particular. So growth was not as robust as we had hoped.
Do we know why property taxes are down?
I think that the housing market is still stabilizing, particularly in the areas that were hottest during the previous housing buildup, the Central Valley, the Inland Empire, and new starts are nowhere near where they were. We have yet to recover. It was anticipated that when we had the downturn in 06, 7, and 8, that it would take until 2015 to reach the same level of growth. We are yet there, so we'll know in a year.
So here's the question. We have more money than we anticipated. We are in surplus. What do we do with the surplus? Do we cut taxes? Do we put it in a rainy day fund? Do we restore money that was taken during the downturn?
I think that it's a combination of a number of things. One is that we must show the voters that we understand what fiscal discipline means, and the temporary tax extinction that we have via Prop 30 on sales and income above $250,000. That will sunset in 2017.
That's soon.
Very soon. So the governor has really been wise, as of legislative leaders Tony Atkins and Darrell Steinberg, in helping us craft a responsible agenda that pays down deferrals to education, pays down debt owed to local government. That's the wall of debt the governor references. And looks toward what strategic investments we can make, particularly in early childhood education.
Although you talk about early childhood education, as you know, the prior speaker, John Perez, Darrell Steinberg, had proposed a program known as traditional kindergarten. It was a big part of their initiative this year. We don't see the governor pushing for it.
Well, the governor, rightfully so, is very focused on how we deal with the current and future budget years in a responsible way that is strategic with respect to its investments, those investments that get the biggest bang for our buck. We know, those who engage in public budgeting, that the investment in human and physical infrastructure are the biggest bangs that you get. So education is the human infrastructure largely. Physical infrastructure, roads, bridges, transportation infrastructure, infrastructure for industrial activity. California is a huge oil and gas state. We're a huge state that does, at one time we did a lot of new starts in development. It's not as robust as it was, though we are adding construction jobs. Year over year, we've added several thousand construction jobs, and we're growing month to month. So that's a positive sign. A lot of that is driven by public works and public-private partnerships. So those are the things that the governor has talked about, but it's really getting early childhood to be understood in that context. And it's not just transitional kindergarten or universal preschool, but it's things like the infrastructure of that system. What are the provider rates for an early childhood or a state's preschool? Because early childhood, you got child care and you got preschool. We want to eventually get to a system that is harmonized, that covers the child care concerns of Californians, particularly the neediest Californians, but also invites a conversation about high-level curriculum and keeping providers in the system.
When we come back, I want to talk more about it. For our viewers on HLN, thanks for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back. So let's talk about this whole notion of paying down debt, because you discussed that, you mentioned that, and we know that the leaders in the Assembly and the Senate have come to an agreement on what we know as a rainy day fund. And part of the discussion in terms of the surplus is to put some money toward a rainy day fund. So it sits there. It's not spent to restore prior cuts. It's not spent to decrease taxes.
It's there for economic distress and to pay down ongoing liabilities, some of which can qualify under our unfunded liabilities, retirement in particular.
So the question becomes, is that the best way to spend the surplus? You know as well as anyone.
It's a temporary. So the surplus is not an ongoing pot of money. It is, and it will not be as large as time goes on, unless growth continues and we extend the levels of taxation that we currently have. It represents the increased taxes are $6.5 billion. That's the structural deficit. Obligations to collections, that's the structural deficit right there, $6.5 billion. So when that expires, we will have a $6 billion problem. Half of it always comes from education, because Prop 98 is 42 cents every dollar out of the general funds go straight there. The good thing about a rainy day fund is it will start capturing the revenues, particularly the spiking revenues, which are capital gains. That will be and that's income tax. And that will be all capital gains levels above 8.5%, I think it's the excise tax, up to 10 or 12%.
But the question becomes, since we do see this,
and that's from stock dividends and bonuses, by the way.
Right. We do see that Prop 30 would expire unless extended. That's another conversation. But it really begs the question about how we tax and how we charge sales tax.
Correct.
You know, should we be looking at changing the way we charge sales tax, for example, spread it out?
Certainly, the Parsky Commission on Revenue and the Economy that was sanctioned in 2008 came up with several suggestions. It may be good to revisit and work with stakeholders. But you see, I mean, just yesterday there was an historic announcement on Prop 13 closing a loophole that has stakeholders across the spectrum embracing concepts of tax reform, led by Raul Bocanegra from Los Angeles and Tom Amiano from San Francisco.
And what that will do, I mean, and the poster child for it was right near your district, the Fairmont
Hotel. That's right, in Santa Monica.
And I think it's important the viewers understand the way the sale was structured. Majority interest didn't transfer, and so therefore there wasn't an increase in the basis, and so the new owners are able to take advantage of the Prop 13 level.
And the reason you can change it without going back to the ballot is because it was not in Prop 13 in 1978. This was simply the legislature responding to the impact of Prop 13.
It's a clarification.
That's exactly right. Interpreting, I think this was in the early 70s or the early 80s when this particular loophole was created. So this goes back to your question about what tax reform can mean. I think that there's a sense across the board that we have to focus on growth, healthy private sector growth, that we have to make sure that government roles are stabilized, that is, government employment roles and revenues, but that means that you have to have a stable economy and prepare for the hard times, the dips that would be addressed by a rainy day fund.
But you know that because of the way we tax, relying on capital gains spikes, relying on the highest income earners, that we are subject to these roller coaster rides.
The rainy day fund is a step in the right direction, and for 15 years, half of that which comes into the rainy day fund can be used to pay off debt and will aid rather significantly in our efforts to reduce the volatility of revenues, particularly our dependence on volatile revenues.
But the Republicans were pretty firm that accessing the rainy day fund should not be as easy as the governor wanted, for example. So will the funds be accessible if needed?
Yes, certainly they will, and it was at the request of Republicans that we did, I think it's the 50% for debt over 15 years to ensure that that was accounted for. But this is truly a great bipartisan solution, and it shows the stakeholders, again, across the spectrum. I think there are 8 co-authors in each house of each party. And the governor is the sponsor of the bill.
What do you think the voters will say?
I think that the voters will appreciate, particularly if we can show that we are about investing in California and making smart investments, that they are confident that we're spending their dollars well.
His name is Sebastian Ridley-Thomas. He is my assembly member, and we are coming to you from Sacramento, California on California Edition.